When bass anglers think about cold water, it brings about visions of horrible conditions and bass lurking in the depths. And depending what part of the country you're in, cold water could be in the low 40s, or maybe if you're farther south, that's up in the lower 50s. But no matter where you're located, those colder than normal conditions where that water temp is dipping down can create some really mentally tough challenges for us. Well, I was able to sneak out for just a few minutes the other day when the ice was just starting to pull away from the north shoreline. That water temperature was right at 43 degrees. It was calm and the sun was high in the sky, which means that radiant heat ought to play a factor, right? Well, within a few seconds, I got lucky and found a nice school of bass. And the thing here that we really have to take note of is when I first located these fish, they were hanging out in 1.5 feet of water. And the other thing that we want to take note of is that these bass were still relating to the shade, but they were still shallow enough that they could take advantage of the heat in the surrounding shallow water. Now, some were motionless while others were swimming slowly around in and out of the shade, but they were always close to the edge created by the shade. And the more that I filmed these bass, the more that something else caught my attention. There was no other life whatsoever, nothing. I could not find any minnows. I didn't see any panfish, and even when I went down deeper into the depths, which in this particular bay was at 9 to 10 foot range, I thought, maybe there'd be some bluegills down here still relating to the bottom. Nothing. But this brings up the question, why were these bass here? As I mentioned earlier, this little bay is about 9 to 10 feet deep in the center, and the main lake where it drops off into deeper water is about 400 feet away, and right outside the mouth of this bay, it hits that 20 to 25 foot mark really quickly. And the fact that there isn't a shred of other life here makes me think that the only reason they moved into this shallower bay had to be for the warmer water. And this is the first major piece of shade-producing cover as you come into this bay. So what do we take away from this, and how in the world can it apply to our fishing? Well, most importantly, we cannot, as bass anglers, underestimate how soon that they will move shallow. I mean, it is February here in northern Illinois, and these fish are in less than 2 foot of water. And the second thing we can't underestimate is how significant the slightest temperature variation can mean to the bass. And believe me, I never would have guessed that I would have seen no other life forms. Now, it's not saying they weren't somewhere else in this bay, but I searched and searched and searched, and I could not find them. So as you're first walking down the shoreline, or you're first dropping that boat into the water, take a look at that sun when it's late winter or early spring, and figure out, where's it at? What is the angle of it? Are there portions of the body of water that you are fishing that is getting some direct sunlight? And once you dial that in, assume that there's going to be some bass in there and that they could be super shallow. So be extremely cautious as you work your way into that portion of the lake or pond or river or whatever you're fishing. And I would be using some really finesse tackle, light line, and casting from a distance. And if you would want to watch a video that talks about unlocking the full potential of a Ned rig on the back half of our presentation, go ahead and check this one out right here, and make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.